The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes is a poem that celebrates the passionate love of its two central characters. The first stanza establishes the stormy tone that will pervade the entire poem. On its most basic level, the stanza describes a windy night and the highwayman's approach on horseback. But in describing the violent wind, Noyes uses images that we might just as easily associate with stormy waters, a torrent of darkness, and cloudy seas. By attributing sea like characteristics to the wind, Noyes magnifies its intensity. He also creates a world that seems oddly unsettled. Not only is the ocean confused with the wind, but even the moon itself seems unstable. It is tossed about in the sky. It is from this wildly disordered nighttime world that the highwayman first emerges. This is, from the start, we associate the highwayman with the chaotic and mysterious forces of nature. Noyes devotes the next stanza to describing the highwayman's clothing. We can gather from these lines that the highwayman is a sexy, fashionable dresser. Although Noyes draws our attention to the highwayman's weapons, they appear more decorative than functional. His pistols and sword is repeated 3 times. With his sparkling weapons, the highwayman himself seems almost like one of the stars in the jeweled sky. In the third stanza, the highwayman arrives at the inn. The repetition of the hard C and K sounds in the first line mimics the sound of the horse's hoofs on the cobblestones. The third stanza also offers an excellent example of narrative compression, that is, Noyes manages to convey a lot of information in a very few lines. Not only does Noyes inform us that Bess opens the window to the highwayman, but through careful diction he suggests that Bess and the highwayman are already lovers. Bess is waiting for the highwayman, which implies that she had expected his arrival and she is braiding a love knot or token of love into her hair. Noyes makes careful use of color in these lines. With her sensual black eyes and long black hair, Bess, like the highwayman, is also identified with the night. Moreover, both the highwayman and Bess wear a dark red article of clothing. This color effectively foreshadows the bloody end to which they will each come. The fourth stanza introduces Tim, a jealous table hand who is spying on Bess and the highwayman. Noyes repeats the word dark twice in the first lines. We are no longer aware of the moonlight that illuminated the first 3 stanzas. Oddly, the only mention of light in this stanza is Tim's sickly white face. Noyes has reversed our normal expectations. Usually, we associate the dark with evil and light with good. Here, however, the light seems dangerous and forbidding. Still underneath her window, the highwayman tells Bess about the robbery he plans to commit later that night. Noyes continues to establish the highwayman as a creature of the night. Not only does the highwayman intend to return to Bess before daybreak, but his greatest concern is being pursued through the day. Notice the recurrence of the phrase by moonlight in the last 3 lines of the stanza. The first 2 instances occur in the 2 trimeter lines. The third occurs in the first half of the final hexameter. By echoing the same 3 stressed phrase 3 times, Noyes creates climactic effect. This climatic build prepares for the dramatic stanza which follows. It concludes the first part of the poem. In it, the highwayman bids farewell to Bess and rides off to the west of England, probably toward Wales. The description of their farewell is at once highly sensual and sexually charged. As Bess's long hair spills over the highwayman's face, we are told that it burned like a brand. A brand is a tool used to burn an identifying mark in the flesh, and we have a sense here that in parting, the two lovers have become permanently identified with each other. We also notice the recurrence of the water imagery that appeared in the first stanza. Bess's hair is described as a cascade or waterfall and as having waves. By re-invoking this water imagery, Noyes links Bess to the stormy, windy night. At the end of part 1, Noyes has not only portrayed the passionate bond between the highwayman and Bess, but he has also associated both the lovers with chaotic and dark night. The narrative resumes at sunset the following day. Almost a full day has passed, but the highwayman has not yet returned. Instead, a whole troop of British soldiers appear, warned no doubt by Tim. Note the many ways in which this stanza echoes the very first stanza of the poem. The second lines of both stanzas mention the moon. The third lines describe the road as a ribbon on the purple moor. In the fourth, fifth, and sixth lines, a present participle verb, separated by dashes, is repeated 4 times. The first stanza heralded the appearance of the highwayman. Given the way this stanza so closely echoes the first, we expect him to reappear. It is all the more disquieting when in his place the redcoats appear. The next stanza is extraordinarily violent. It begins with the violation of the landlord himself. The soldiers barge into the inn and take his ale. More important, the redcoats gag and tie up Bess, an action that is deliberately aggressive of sexual violence. Note the difference between the highwayman's and the soldier's treatment of Bess. We would expect the soldiers to be orderly and law-abiding and the highwayman to be cruel and uncaring. Exactly the opposite is true. Again, we see Noyes reversing our expectations. The images of sexual violence and abuse become even more pronounced as the soldiers mock and then kiss Bess. They tie her up to attention with a gun pointed to her chest, a grotesque parody of a soldier. This stanza is remarkable for its sadistic overtones, given Noyes' otherwise conservative attitudes toward the portrayal of sexuality and violence. One wonders why he would have written such a cruel scene. At best, we can say that the soldier's behavior serves as a useful contrast to the highwayman's. Their repulsiveness makes us appreciate even more the purity of the highwayman's love for Bess. Having recognized that the highwayman will certainly be killed if he reaches the inn, Bess attempts to warn him. She strains against the rope until she is able to reach the trigger. In describing this scene, Noyes uses a series of discordant, grating rhymes: good and blood, midnight and it, yours and hers. Good and blood are called I rhymes. The others are called of rhymes. All create a sense that something is, in fact, slightly off or wrong. No accident, considering the terribly wrong act of suicide that Bess is about to commit. The first line of the next stanza echoes the last line of the previous stanza, reminding us that Bess only needs to be able to reach the trigger in order to kill herself. In the second line, we are told that Bess stood up to attention, an odd echo of line 49, which described the soldiers' mocking treatment of her. In this context, however, the sense of the phrase is transformed. Rather than being demeaned, Bess grows in nobility as she prepares to sacrifice herself for her lover. The reference to blood in the last line of the stanza warns us that Bess's own blood will soon be spilled. This line also reminds us of the permanent bond between the two lovers. We are told the pulse of the blood in Bess's veins throbs to the same beat as her lover's refrain. It is not until the following stanza, however, that we are told that the highwayman's refrain is. We are now told that the refrain is actually the sound of the highwayman's horse's hoofs. For the second time in the poem, we hear the highwayman approaching the inn. Noyes again uses the same formula that he used in the first stanza to describe the highwayman's approach. The third line repeats the image of a ribbon of moonlight, and the fourth and fifth lines repeat the word riding 3 times. But here noise makes a notable change. In the first stanza, the word riding also appears in the final line. It signals that the highwayman's arrival at the inn door. In this stanza, noise substitutes the word priming for riding. This unexpected substitution drives home the idea that instead of arriving at the inn door, the highwayman will meet the primed muskets of the soldiers. Just as the highwayman is about to be shot, Bess pulls the trigger and kills herself. However, the gun shatters not only Bess's chest but the moonlight itself, because both Bess and the highwayman are so closely identified with the moonlight. Bess's death seems to disrupt the entire night world. Just as the moonlight has become shattered or broken, the rhythm of the line itself has been shattered. The highwayman hears the gunshot and escapes, not realizing that Bess has killed herself. Notably, he does not learn the truth until the next morning and daylight. Bess, he is told, died in the darkness. Her death signals an end to the mysterious and sensual nighttime world she and her lover had inhabited. Bess's death thrusts the poem into the glaring light of day. Noise's diction underscores the unpleasant nature of the whiteness associated with the daylight hours. When the highwayman learns of Bess's death, for instance, he blanks or turns white with dread. The imagery of this stanza reminds us that we are now indeed in the ugly daylight world dominated by the soldiers. No longer a ribbon of moonlight, the road is white and smoking. If the highwayman had governed the nighttime world, he is clearly out of his element in the daylight. With no trouble, the soldiers pursue and shoot him. He dies in the very highway he had once ruled. He has been reduced from the mysterious highwayman to a dog on the highway. The final two stanzas repeat almost word for word the first and third stanzas of the poem. After the bloody carnage of part 2, these lines take on added dimension. On one level, they bring us full circle to the beginning of the poem, reminding us of the pure love that Bess and the highwayman once shared. On another level, the repetition of these lines suggests that despite the carnage, the bond between the two lovers is so strong that even death cannot destroy it. In spirit and in our imaginations, the renegade highwayman will forever be riding up the inn door, where Bess will forever be there to welcome him. One is left to wonder then where the victory lies, with the cruel and ugly powers of the day or with the mysterious forces of the night.